Oxford retracted their statement.
These guys had published already over 20 peer-reviewed scientific journal articles. They knew from the start to be suspicious of this.
Really?
But what I like, and I would lead with this now, as of 2017, we have a published article that shows that the conclusions from 1988 are no longer sustainable. So I should say that again, the very publication, Archaeometry, out of Oxford, that published this 1260 to 13, it said that conclusion can no longer be sustained. And so
I'm sure that hit the front pages all around the world too,
yeah,
right?
Right, not.
And that is why they got all three of these dates and combined them into one date and said that it was ranging from 1260 to 1390.
Wait, so what's that image of?
Your Lord and Savior.
Other dating methods put it at the turn of the century. Let me give you one example. They did forensics on the actual pollen that they found. And this pollen and dirt was uniquely geographically found only in Judea.
We have pollens that went extinct in the Byzantine period that are on the Shroud of Turin, which means they are older than the Byzantine period, which means it would be impossible for a forger smarter than you or me who can somehow go back and find pre-Byzantine period pollen and place that all over the Shroud of Turin.
So now we have when, and also the evidence puts it at the location of the crime. So we got the where. We have the when, where. Now why? Well, that's easy. Occam's razor is because this is the receipt of what was done for us.
Wait, I think that's not Occam's razor. I feel like you're better off just saying that.
The simplest
Wait, the most simple
the most likely. Leo, just mute up, man. We just spent the better part of an hour breaking down the science to you. So no, you don't have any right to say any of that bullshit right now. I successfully articulated scientifically every single point. So don't sit there and pretend like I didn't just spend a whole fucking hour reasoning with you. Don't do that shit, bro.
I'm not denying that it appeared at the time you appeared.
Leo, let me just simplify it, okay? Because I love you, okay? And even though you don't believe in Jesus, I still love you.
If he were telling the truth, he wouldn't have told us. Unless, of course, he knew you wouldn't believe the truth, even if he told us.
Oxford also published in 2019 and retracted their findings from 1988. It was an embarrassment. That's why you don't know about that. Even though it happened more recently, you only know about what happened in 1988. But that's because the Matrix wants you to believe this. You have been...
You're saying that... Where is it?
You have... Here, let me show you. Hold on a second.
Yeah, I don't think there's a scientific consensus that the original findings are invalid.
This is the actual paper. I was reading through this paper earlier, but this was published by Oxford, the same publishing source that published that article you're referring to in 1988. I have the PDF. I can send you this. I can email you this whole entire paper. You might be able to Google it. The Shroud of Turin and Oxford University, Pam Moon. I'm sure you can find this whole article and read it for yourself. You're in university now, so you should be able to comprehend the contents of this article.
Yeah, well, first of all, the PDF I found isn't even on an academic journal.
No, this is published by Oxford, bro.
No,
this article that you're looking at right now is published by the same Oxford University that published that article back in 1988. This is the article. I only showed you a screenshot of the first fucking page. So if you're going to ask me where exactly it says that, I'm telling you, go Google it. Do your own fucking homework.
I have the whole thing in front of me, and I looked at every page, and it doesn't say that Oxford published it. Like I can do a find word, like the Control F, and I'll just look up Oxford Publishing, and it just doesn't mention that. Dude, where does that say that Oxford published it? That's the title.
I'm surprised that was published by Oxford University. What exactly are you? Oxford published the original 1988 study. It was Oxford, Arizona, and Zurich.
Yeah, no, wait, host, are you saying that the article that you have behind you was published by Oxford? Because I don't see any evidence of that.
What it says the Shroud of Turin and Oxford University.
That's the title.
Oxford University.
That's the title.
That says Redeemer University College.
I don't really think any of that is. It doesn't really matter if Oxford published it because, like, we have articles from PubMed about the Shroud of Turin and the dating. We have articles from CSAN. We have articles from like Sydney EDU. All of these would show that the carbon dating that they did in the original study between Oxford, Arizona, and Zurich was on a patch of the Shroud of Turin that was repaired in the 1200s or 1300s, depending on when they dated it to. So those studies were inaccurate. When you test the actual shroud and not a patch, well, that dates back to the 1st century. And it's also more accurate of dating that we did. The new kind of dating was nuclear or something. I forgot, but that form is more accurate.
Wait, where did it say that?
Mute up, everybody mute up. You challenged me and asked me something that I didn't know the answer to, so I discovered it. But Pam Moon, it says, is a British researcher and independent scholar known for her extensive work on the Shroud of Turin. She is not originally from Oxford, but she has a significant academic and professional connection to the city. In 2001, she completed an Oxford diploma in ministry at Wycliffe Hall, an Anglican theological college affiliated with the University of Oxford.
Oxford retracted their statement.
These guys had published already over 20 peer-reviewed scientific journal articles. They knew from the start to be suspicious of this.
Really?
But what I like, and I would lead with this now, as of 2017, we have a published article that shows that the conclusions from 1988 are no longer sustainable. So I should say that again, the very publication, Archaeometry, out of Oxford, that published this 1260 to 13, it said that conclusion can no longer be sustained. And so
and I'm sure that hit the front pages all around the world too,
yeah,
right?
No, exactly. So although it is a matter of mainstream science, so if you want to find in the literature, you're going to bump into this. The French researcher who published this article is Tristan Casabianca, another friend of ours who teaches at our university, and he goes into all the details. It's a fascinating story, but I want to say it was in 2017 that according to the Freedom of Information Act, these laboratories were compelled by law to release the raw data that shows how heterogeneous were their individual results, because there was Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona. Those were the three laboratories. And the idea was that they were going to publish independently and that their particular results, but that didn't happen. They lumped them together and gave us this big arc, 1260 to 1390, 95% sure that this is the time period from which the Shroud hails, and so it's fake. But the bottom line is that they use a sample from the top left corner of the Shroud, which we know to be anomalous. It's just not representative of the rest of the Shroud. And we knew that, and we had proof of that 10 years prior. You would think somebody would have the sense.
Do you think they knew that?
Well, they ought to have known. That much we know. We knew though this, that in the moment that they're cutting the sample, 8 centimeters of the most prized relic in all of Christendom, and of course you know that with carbon dating, you carbonize, that is, you destroy, you put into a fire basically this cloth, never to be seen again. And so you think you'd be very careful. Like compare that to the STIRP team, the Shroud of Turin research project of 1978. For a whole year, they prepare just so all of their tests will be non-invasive, non-destructive. And yet here, we're about to destroy forever 8 centimeters, and they don't know where they're going to take the sample 2 hours prior to the experiment. And it's all on videotape.
It's irrelevant. It doesn't really matter if they retracted it because it's been disproven. And
Yeah.
the they used was still
what's the
chemical
source for that? What's the source for that? That it was disproven?
So CSAN, so you can go to csan.org. The title of it is going to be Nuclear Analysis of the Shroud of Turin Part 2. Then there's a PubMed study. It's called Statistical and Provocative Analysis of an Interlaboratory Comparison, the Radiocarbon Dating of the Shroud of Turin. That shows that Oxford study was faulty, the Oxford, Zurich, and Arizona study. Then there's another one, Sydney.edu, the Radiocarbon Dating of the Shroud of Turin. This one would show it's faulty. So 2 of them disprove it, and 1 of them establishes the new claim.
The radiocarbon dating of Shroud. Okay.
Okay, all right, here. Hold up, Leo. You want me to further elaborate on what our brother just said?
Yeah.
This is the sample that Oxford got. This is the sample that Zurich got. And this is the sample that Arizona got. And this is the sample that we still have that has not been destroyed. All 3 of these samples produced differing dates. And that is why they got all 3 of these dates and combined them into one date and said that it was ranging from 1260 to 1390. Now, here's the big problem with that. And I've confirmed with ChatGPT, because I can only debate with ChatGPT. I can't debate with humans because humans have a natural propensity to bullshit and lie. ChatGPT at least doesn't lie. It will admit when it's wrong when you correct it. But I said, what are the parameters in which you can see the accuracy or precision of carbon dating? And it said if the artifact is within 3,000 years, which the Shroud of Turin is 2,000 years, the precision should produce a standard deviation of 25 years, meaning it shouldn't swing more than 25 years. But yet all 3 of these results provide a swing of 130 years, and these samples are side by side. It's not like you got one sample on this portion of the cloth and then another portion on this section. You're getting the same samples from literally the same spot, but they knew before they even took this sample that this portion of the shroud was anomalous to the rest of the shroud, but yet they took it anyways. Why? That's the question that you need to ask as a true skeptic. If you really are going to be a skeptic as a scientist, you need to start weighing all the evidence, not just the popular evidence that gets shoved down your throat.
And like the most recent study that I'm aware of is the 2022 study. It was done by people it was like Dr. Liberto in Italy, and they dated it back to the first century.
Where's that?
Are you
you can just look up
Paolo di Lazzaro?
look up Dr. Liberto. Let me just
Liberto?
yeah, Dr. Libe.
There's been 4 different studies that have been published on different dating methods outside of carbon dating that puts this linen fabric at the turn of the century.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
like,
even
it's
down
pretty
to
widely
the
accepted. Like over the past couple years, it's been widely accepted that it dates back to the first century. Nah, that's not really even up for debate.
Oh, you're saying it's scientific consensus that it dates back to the first century?
I said it's widely accepted. Depends on what you mean by consensus.
Like over 50% in the field accept it?
I don't have empirics on it, but I wouldn't be surprised.
I don't see that anywhere.
Yeah, but look up Dr. Liberto, Liberato, at De Caro of Italy's Institute of... Yeah, this is a mouthful. De Caro of Italy's Institute of Crystallography utilized wax. There you go. Whatever the fuck that means. Yeah, but you can just Google that. That's their study. But then there are tons of other studies that dated back to the first century. Mechanical and optochemical dating of the Turin Shroud, Maytech Web of Conferences. This has about 17 studies all on the Shroud, all of which would support its dating in the first century.
You said mechanical what?
Mechanical, O-N-D, the mechanical space, O-N-D, space again, opto, O-P-T-O, dash, chemical. You there?
Yeah.
All right. Dating of the Turin Shroud. Then after that, just type in MATEC Web of Conferences. And then you should be brought to a page that has 17 studies on it. The first study on it should be...
All right, hold up. Let me read to you what I found real quick. This is found on the unexpectedcosmology.com. And it says, Dr. Liberto De Caro and a team of scientists from the said group applied what's called a wide-angle X-ray scattering to 8 small samples of fabric from the cloth. This process allowed researchers to examine the garment at a microscopic level, enabling them to determine the time the shroud was actually manufactured. Will you be happy to know the results are in? The fabric is a match with fabric that is confirmed to have come from the siege of Masada in 55 to 74 AD, which is to say the shroud was manufactured approximately 2,000 years ago. It is authentic.
Yeah,
Even with the dating, the dating, I don't even think that's really too relevant.
Yeah, so if it is...
The way the image was generated is much more convincing. An image that would take, unless you think that people back then had the power to create images like that. Obviously they don't. Let's say they were more advanced than we are now.
Wait, so what's that image of?
Your Lord and Savior.
Wait, that's not the shroud. The shroud refers to the linen, right?
That is the shroud. That's the image on the shroud.
Oh, I understand. Okay. And you're saying that image was demonstrated like 0 AD?
No, that would be when Christ was born. It'd be around like...
Would you say?
No,
Around
so
30.
what
Okay.
the Shroud of Turin is confirming, research from Dr. Liberto De Caro is confirming is that this linen comes from the turn of the century, which would put the artifact at the scene of the crime. Because if we are to base it off of the old reading from 1988, where they just fudged 3 different separate dates and said it's a medieval hoax from 1260 to 1390, that is nowhere near the scene of the crime, because Jesus was crucified in 30 AD. And if you put the linen fabric, the dating methods outside of carbon dating, because carbon dating is not a very consistent or accurate form of dating, the other dating methods put it at the turn of the century. Let me give you one example. They did forensics on the actual pollen that they found. And this pollen and dirt was uniquely geographically found only in Judea.
We have pollen from all of the areas where the shroud is known to have traveled. We don't just have pollen on the shroud from April in Jerusalem. We have pollen on the shroud through Edessa, that's Turkey, Constantinople, Athens, up to France, all the way into Turin. And so we actually see evidence on the shroud itself that it has been in all of these places places where we have records thanks to Eusebius and others.
We have pollens that went extinct in the Byzantine period that are on the Shroud of Turin, which means they are older than the Byzantine period, which means it would be impossible for a forger smarter than you or me who can somehow go back and find pre-Byzantine period pollen and place that all over the Shroud of Turin.
So that would also be circumstantial evidence that places this artifact at the scene of the crime. So now we have when. When was the artifact? Was it at the scene of the crime? That's why you have to have an alibi, right? The whole purpose of getting an alibi is to make sure that you're not at the scene of the crime. But now we've confirmed that the time, when, it puts it at the scene of the crime, and also the evidence puts it at the location of the crime. So we got the where. We have the when, where. Now why? Well, that's easy. Occam's razor is because this is the receipt of what was done for us.
Wait, I think that's not Occam's razor. I feel like you're better off just saying that
The simplest
the most simple
the most likely.
the most simple solution is that there's a natural process that we're not aware of. That's a much more simpler
How is that?
explanation.
No, that is not a more simple solution.
Wait,
Leo, bro, no. And brother, Christ follower, just mute up real quick. You got a constant fuzz going on. Bro, Leo, just mute up, man. We just spent the better part of an hour breaking down the science to you. So no, you don't have any right to say any of that bullshit right now. I successfully articulated scientifically every single point. So don't sit there and pretend like I didn't just spend a whole fucking hour reasoning with you. Don't do that shit, bro.
I'm not denying that it appeared at the time you appeared. I'm saying that perhaps a more simple explanation could just be that there was some natural state of affairs that occurred, and we're just not aware of what that natural state of affairs.
Leo, let me just simplify it, okay? Because I love you, okay? Leo, I want you to know that I love you, and even though you don't believe in Jesus, I still love you. But for the love of God, please absorb what I'm about to tell you. When it comes to all of the evidence, like the collimated light, you don't find collimated light anywhere in nature. So when you are telling me there has to be a natural explanation for an unnatural source of light that created an image that just so happens to line up with the exact depiction of Jesus in the gospel accounts, and then you're telling me that Occam's razor is to say the simplest solution would say that some sort of natural process created this, and I told you already that the image was created by a unnatural source of light that you don't find anywhere in nature. Then if you don't understand that, I can't talk with you anymore.
Wait, host, maybe I could say something that would make it more clear for Leo, right? Because he's simply talking about the light. Maybe that's just a more probable solution if we're only talking about that. But what you want to posit is probably something like this. There's a shroud from the 1st century from the region of Jesus that has the exact image, but a very similar image to every icon, even the oldest icons dating back to that time. So what you want to say is
No. In fact, many of the early icons of Jesus were inspired by the Shroud of Turin. Some of the details that you'll find in the shroud are depicted in the actual art itself.
Yeah, I know what they're talking about. They're talking about what's called the akerapoieta. So in Greek, there's a word. Transliteration would be something like ACHEIROPOIETA. So, but there are these images that are called not made with human hands because they're following a prototype, which is understood to be not made with human hands. So the theory actually goes that because there are some 250 points of coincidence between these images. So if you go into the courtroom and let's say I want to accuse you of a heinous crime, like you stole my relic in Rome and you go like off to the Bahamas or something, and I need to make an image of you and hold you accountable in court, my drawing better match up to your real face by 50 points of coincidence. But we have some 250 points of coincidence between some of these icons and the shroud itself. And they're really counterintuitive artistic traits. Like, for example, there's a U between the eyebrows in many icons. There's a horizontal line that cuts across the throat, or like bulging eyebrows I told you about, or accentuated cheeks, swollen cheeks. But my favorite one, though, is the mop of hair. You know, it's like, why does Jesus always have to have this massive hairdo? Why doesn't somebody do something different? Or the best is the wisp of hair, like right here at the center. And of course...
Can we maybe pull up these icons while we're talking about this? That might be helpful.
Yeah, so there's St. Catherine's on the far left. I want to say this is Cefalu on the far right. I think this one in the middle is from the 12th century, and I can't remember where it's from, but I have the notes on it elsewhere. But it's just a good example of just how in different different places and in different times, again and again. Some of these are mosaics or paintings, but we could multiply this by 5. And if you go to an Othoni exhibit, you'll see the shroud in the center, and you'll have like 9 images all around the side. And this is one of the things that was studied very early on. I want to say it's Paul Vignon, who enumerates something like 13 to 15 characteristics here, but that are again and again the same.
So you think this is all inspired by the shroud and the headpiece?
Oh, that's exactly the theory, is that they're looking at the shroud, and because this is a divine prototype, they can't diverge. They can't do something different.
Meaning that the early Christians knew about the Shroud of Turin.
Yeah, some of them knew. But there were some Christians who didn't see the Shroud of Turin. Like some of the early Christians didn't see it. And even their icons that they depicted from just eyewitness accounts of what Jesus looked like are very similar. So you want to say something like this, Leo. A source of light that we only know to be unnatural, that would require the same amount of energy as running every single grid in the country for 3 days, occurred in a cave around a man who looks exactly like every depiction of Jesus that's ever been drawn. And it happened in the 1st century in the same town Jesus lived. Or around
Wait, hold on, wait, what's the light called?
It's column light.
Column light?
Yeah.
No, collimated. Let me go back to this picture. This is what collimated light is. Collimated light is just a straight line. Radial light, like when you look at the sun, it radiates. There's rays that bounce around it. That is what you find in nature. Everywhere in nature, you find this. But this is what created the image.
If he were telling the truth, he wouldn't have told us. Unless, of course, he knew you wouldn't believe the truth, even if he told us.